Okay, everybody. So we're going to talk about chapter 9 in this lecture right here. So we're going to talk about economics and different economic systems throughout the world. We're going to talk about three concrete ways in which national economies vary. They're abstract models. We're going to talk about a market, a command, and a mixed economy. And we're going to also talk about features of the United States, German, and Malaysian economies in terms of things like labor, finance, how government influences and how they represent contrasting political decisions. Then we're going to talk about classic liberal cases for a market, kind of going back to that Adam Smith theory. And then we're going to talk about three plausible explanations for Germany's generous redistributive policies. So, as you know, what's the nuts and bolts of economics? It can include the selling of goods and services. Usually we go out and want to buy something, and there's a price set. The price is usually where supply meets demand. The higher the supply, the lower the demand, the cheaper the price is going to be. The lower the supply, the higher demand, the more expensive. Simple as that. Sometimes people barter. We know what that is, maybe doing a service instead of money, trading. And sometimes people will barter because it may be, actually cheaper. And, we see it all the time. And sometimes people will trade things among themselves individually. So there's always ways that, our economic system can have influences on it. One way to measure the prosperity of countries is by its GDP, gross domestic product. It's a formula I don't expect you to know, but generally understand that GDP is a way to measure a country's prosperity, where we have private consumption plus gross investment plus government spending plus the difference between exports minus imports. Here's a list of the GDPs up into 2019, and like I said, the more money a GDP is generated, the means a country is a little bit more prosperous. And if you look at this link, you can go and look at the CIA World Factbook, and it'll show you the different GDPs of everything across the world. So how is wealth produced? Here in the United States, we basically focus on industrialization, and most of our jobs are going to be in the service industry, whether it's working at a fast food place or a retail store, or even maybe doing somebody's taxes for them. Most jobs here in the U.S. are going to be in the service industry, and a lot of people work in manufacturing and also kind of providing their talents to whatever kind of the things that they want to do in life might push them toward the type of jobs that they want to do. Kind of in a post-industrial society, there's low employment in agriculture and industry. We all kind of know the history of that, kind of the evolution of the United States economy, going from an agricultural society to a more industrialized society. And then, even we have so much automation now that sometimes industrialization and those factory jobs have ceased to exist. Now, one way that we measure inequality here in the world is something called the Gini index. This is a way to measure the difference or the gap between the rich and the poor in countries throughout the world. And we'll look at some of these. And you could see here, it's interesting that we look at this and we see that the United States and Mexico have about the same level of inequality. And this is something that, is a little bit surprising to people, where, if you go down to Mexico, you probably would see a lot of poverty, a lot of lacking of public services, infrastructure. But it's really interesting to kind of see that gap between the rich and the poor is relatively the same here in the United States as compared to Mexico. And in fact, the United States is a little bit lower. Now, let's talk about the differences in economy. So a pure market economy, it's where private individuals will own our property and do what they want with it, kind of, capitalism. Prices will naturally adjust to meet supply and demand. Like I said, when the supply is high and the demand is low, prices are going to be cheaper. when the demand is high and the supply is low, prices are going to be more expensive. And we operate off kind of the concept of having a comparative advantage where we go out and shop and maybe look at where we can get the most bang for our buck, right? Capitalism is one process within this market system. People who own capital, remember, capital could be, one of the major factors of production that we have in economics: land, labor, and capital. People who own money or capital make more money without directly doing the labors themselves. And as we kind of remember, when we talked a little bit about that with Marx, that was his main criticism of capitalism, where these factory owners or these business owners make a ton of money, but they do it off of the backs and the hard work of their employees and sometimes don't share. Part of this is owning profitable businesses and investing money in other businesses or charging interest on a loan. The really important part of this is kind of a voluntary exchange between consumers. So you go down to the store, there's something you want to buy, you give money to the store, you take the item, then the store will use that money to pay their workers or to pay for the manufacturing of the good that you just bought. So it's kind of a circular cycle here. Now, when we talk about a command economy, this is an economy where you have a lot of government intervention involved. People don't own property, right? The government determines what the economies produce. And if you get it right, there are no winners or losers in the economy because in some senses, people are treated equally. Now, one of the arguments about this is, how do we handle competition? Well, there is none. How do we handle people innovating? Well, people can't really innovate because the government determines what everything does. So there's kind of some criticism about this as well. Command economies can be described as socialist in nature. But remember, as we talked about, there's going to be many threads of socialism and many aspects of that ideology that socialism kind of puts out there. When we see the word socialist, we tend to think about communist states like the former Soviet Union or China, and this defined a command economy as necessary to response to immoral capitalism. This kind of the criticisms that we talked about with Marx, and the idea is the government should step in and mitigate any type of inequality that exists. No economy today comes close to a pure version of a command economy or a market economy. One thing that we can look at here in the United States is we have a mixed economy where we have an economic system that is put into place to, in a sense, protect the consumer as well as the employee. And I think, no matter what your ideology is, I think we can agree that at the very minimum, the government should step in and make sure that the consumer is protected as well as the employee. We don't want to go out and buy a car and the next day we go to drive it and it doesn't start and we don't have any recourse for that. Now, when we talk about versions of command economies, the Soviet Union and a lot of those countries in the Eastern Bloc were pretty close to command economies, but they eventually, the central planners often failed. After the fall in 1992, countries moved toward more a market-based economy and capitalism. China incorporated market reforms in the 1980s, and I think North Korea is kind of the biggest or the best example of a strict command economy that is in the U.S. and the world. When we talk about versions of market economies, and a lot of you that might have taken world history and, kind of focusing on the 1880s and after, kind of when we started to change from that agricultural society to a more industrial society. 19th century United States was probably the closest in history to a pure market economy. We had the Rothschild, Carnegie, a lot of these people that are making a lot of money, even when the United States had tariffs, regulations, and targeted grants for public land. one of the things that we saw kind of with this unchecked or the government not intervening in these industrializations kind of led to unsafe factories and monopolies. And it kind of goes back to the point that we just made, where we say that the government should be involved in the economy just to protect the consumer as well as the employee, right? Monopolies stifle competition. So some companies can charge as much as they want if they have a monopoly. And if we want to look at, different kinds of monopolies, you could probably look at one good example here is in San Diego is SDG&E, which is San Diego Gas and Electric, where if you want to get electricity through another place, there's really no other options. So that's a monopoly. So I don't think we really need to go in depth and analyze monopolies because I'm pretty sure you have a handle on it. Also, that we talk about unsafe factories. Upton Sinclair's Jungle talked about some of the things that happened in factories where workers were being injured and you had child labor. You had people not making a lot of money. So there's kind of an agreement that at the very minimum, you need the government to be involved in to mitigate some of these factors here. This is a picture in North Korea of shoes being sold. You can see they're probably pretty much the same. So if we look at versions of market economies, today all economies are mostly mixed. And then the government with the lowest levels of spending and regulations are in poor countries or failed states. And much like we talked about with Afghanistan being a failed state. Remember, Afghanistan doesn't really have any natural resources. So not a lot of revenue that's being generated. So like we said, mixed economies present a range of strategies to be successful in the economic world. We're going to look at the United States, Germany, and Malaysia. These are also seen as the most market-friendly country here in the United States. We have open and hire and fire arrangements. We are at-will employees at times, meaning that our employer can get rid of us at any given time as long as they follow some certain set of procedures. And then we have collective bargaining where, we have the ability to unionize, but union membership has gone down significantly since the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. Back in that time, union membership was roughly about 60% of the workforce. But due to kind of globalization and jobs going outside of the United States, blue-collar jobs like the auto industry or some manufacturing type situations, we've seen membership in unions go down. And usually that's because, those jobs aren't replaced. And even though, most of the union jobs now are going to be in the government, and government employee unions are very strong. But it's really significant to see that, the unions mostly basically just do collective bargaining now and maybe representation in some type of disciplinary manner, and it's kind of very, very alarming now that you've seen union membership go from 60 all the way down to 13%. We have financial markets, flexible sales on stock. Remember, what a stock is. You go and buy a stock at a certain price, meaning you own a piece of a company. If the value of that company rises, that stock will rise also. And if you buy something for $1, say you buy a stock for $1, and then the value of the company goes up, now your stock is worth $2, you just made $1, right? That's kind of, basically on how stock marketing works and the stock market works. Our U.S. tax system is progressive, and like I'm not going to try to act like I totally understand the U.S. tax system. As it's a very complicated, very difficult system to understand. In fact, I bet you there's many tax attorneys that still have a problem understanding some of the tax systems here in the United States. But Here in the United States, we have money taken out of our check. We have to pay money to our government where this money goes to use to fund programs. But in a sense, we also spend less money on programs from the poor than other countries do. We spend a lot of money and a lot of our taxation on defense, right? So also kind of when we talk about Germany, right? Redistribution, codetermination, and bank finance in the social market economy. Germany is a social market economy. It's kind of mixed market capitalism with government programs. There's aspects of redistribution of the wealth, taking money from the wealthy and then giving it to lower earners. And then long-term partnership with economic players. A lot of the times people in Germany will stay in jobs in the same job for the rest of their life. Here in the United States, it's common, and it's not a bad thing, where people might bounce from employer to employer, right? Like I said, it's not anything bad because it's kind of reflective that we may go to places where, maybe we can make some more money. And it's not, like I said, it's not a bad thing. It's just kind of the way we are here in the United States. Social welfare states are much bigger than in the United States. There's free university education, widely available public transportation. Taxes are going to be higher in terms of GDP and slightly more regressive than here in the United States. But they focus more on consumption than income so they can have a higher impact on the poor. So let's say that again. They focus more on consumption than income so they can have a higher impact on the poor. So, more money given to social programs in Germany. Determination means it's legally much harder to fire somebody. It's kind of here in the in California, especially, your most employers are at-will employers, meaning that they can fire you for any reason as long as it's not against the law, right? There are certain steps that have to be taken. Usually, it's a good idea to have a kind of a system or a guideline on maybe disciplining somebody. Somebody's you employ does something wrong, you can usually give them a warning or give them a letter of a write-up, it's usually called. And then you go through that progressive discipline, and if you still have discipline problems with that person after a while, you can get rid of them. And as long as you document and as long as you stay within the law, you should be okay. Usually these companies will also have long-term relationships with the employers. I think my mother is one of the few people that worked for the same employer for her whole career. I think it's getting to be less and less because we tend to jump when we maybe get a better offer with money or maybe benefits. We have individual unions here in Germany and collective bargaining across sectors. Employers have a strong incentive to train their workers well because of that long-term relationship. There's strong vocational programs and apprenticeships in Germany, and that's very different than the U.S. And I think that's where we're lacking here in the U.S. Maybe we should start bringing up more vocational programs, like maybe things like plumbing or electricity or construction management. Stuff you still maybe need to go to school for and get a certificate, but maybe something where you can avoid going to college and getting that 4-year degree. They still pay well. I think one time my water heater went out and I had to hire a plumber to get the water heater installed. The water heater was probably about $800, and it was probably about $500 that I had to pay the plumber for about an hour and a half of work. So you could see those types of programs pay very well. And this is kind of different than here in the United States, where in Germany they push people more toward those vocational programs. I think we need to do that here in the United States as well, but I don't think we do it too often. On the financial market side, businesses have long-term loans and therefore a long-term relationship with big banks. And mergers and corporate takeovers almost never happen in Germany. Here's just a little bit about unionization. And you could see, comparing Germany, it's 60% of the workforce is unionized. And if you look at the United States on the very right, you could see that that's less. So we're probably around 13 to 14%. Malaysia's GDP is a third of America's, but its Gini score is close to the United States. Unions are weak in Malaysia as compared to the United States, but we also have affirmative action programs to help ethnic Malaysians in that area. And Malaysia is one of the hotbeds of, kind of a growing economy that we see here in the United States. Some of the goals of the reforms since in the 70s were used to intervene to help grow the economy faster. So they planned for the economy and for every sector. The incentivized cooperation was planned. You have fixed pricing for essential items to keep them low. Think about doing that here in the United States. Maybe having a cap on the amount of money it costs to buy a gallon of milk. Like, let's cap it at $3. That's one way to keep prices low, or even gasoline. We see gasoline at times to be $5 to $6 a gallon. If we could have a cap of maybe $3 a gallon for gasoline, it's something that's kind of foreign to us because we're very much of the mindset of, the supply and demand model. But it's a very interesting thing to look at if you would fix pricing, right? And they also closely manage international trading of currency. When we talk about different political choices, American wealth not entirely due to economic model. Industrialization faster than Germany or Malaysia. We had vast resources and few organized competitors, and unlike Germany, was not destroyed in World War II. Germany and Malaysia don't necessarily pay a financial price for their more socialist model. Germany weathered huge economic crisis as well, as we saw in the 30s and coming out of World War II. And they still have huge banks and corporations and have done fairly well economically. Malaysia has had the highest growth over the last 50 years. There's poverty levels have plummeted and has the tallest twin towers in the world and many millionaires and billionaires. Policies are still debated within the respective companies. And, here in the United States, we focus more on economic liberty, where we try to make as much money as we can. And again, I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with that. We all go to school, we all learn, we all take classes, maybe to find a better job to make more money. Go into professions that can, in a sense, help us make money. And when we have money, we can buy things, obviously, right? Simple as that. And, economic security also provides maybe a little bit more benefits psychologically. Just a table of looking at the models between the two. United States, we want to increase private wealth, liberty to use wealth freely. We could buy what we want to buy. Flexible economic ties that permit rapid adaptation and innovation, for competition. And then, flexible hiring, firing, stock market finance, redistribution at some levels. Germany's same to produce or to increase private wealth, to try to lessen inequality and encourage cooperation among employers and employees. That leads to a long-term partnership among both the economic players and the government, as well as economic players and their employees. A codetermination, unionization, collective bargaining, a strong banking system, and aspects of redistribution of the wealth. Malaysia is to increase private wealth, catch up to the West, empowering Malay majority, long-range government planning to guide their investments, and largely hiring and firing, but there are aspects of affirmative action, a little bit of redistribution of the wealth, and government intervention to encourage investments. So what do you think? Should we try fluid free markets? Should governments redistribute money from rich to poor or intervene in the economy? It's a matter of your own personal ideology on this. So I'm not going to try to influence you. So go ahead and take a minute and think about that. Should governments redistribute money from rich to poor or intervene in the economy? Think about it. Is that something that we should do here in the United States? And this is very much kind of a Marxist view, the redistribution of the wealth. And we're all going to feel differently about this. Remember, it's going to be based off of your own personal ideology. Markets are going to be naturally good. Classic liberal ideas of individual rights and markets. One of the core aspects that we have here, or the core beliefs that we have here in the United States, is the right to private property. We want to own that house with the white picket fence and the 2 cars in the driveway, right? And it's just kind of how we're conditioned here in the United States. A lot of this is influenced by Locke and Smith. Remember, Locke, said that we all have natural rights to life, liberty, and property. Adam Smith, who wrote Wealth of Nations, said that, we should get into jobs that we are the most talented at doing, and the invisible hand needs to guide the economy, and the government should not get involved and let everything naturally happen. And today, even if we look at conservatives, they feel that, the open market system is the most natural and desirable framework for human happiness. Again, it's a matter of ideology, because you could look at that and say, okay, what about, Jeff Bezos, shooting somebody up into space, where, spending money on that, where we have Amazon workers making $17, $18 an hour, and that sometimes can't even stop and use the bathroom because they need to deliver packages at a certain time. So, it's one of those things that we have to think about and look at. If we look at kind of the Marxist view, and we kind of just talked about that on the influence of Karl Marx, is capitalism is considerably morally wrong and exploits most of the population, and people allow it. Owning or investing in production does not count as real work. So you would think that a lot of these companies are going to be built off of somebody investing money in a corporation or doing some type of technology or innovation. But B, on the other hand, you have people that put in the hard work and the backbreaking work, working in a factory, maybe doing deliveries. It's kind of a moral dilemma that we have when we look at it. Actual Marxists are rare in the United States, but themes resonate. We had the Occupy movement in 2011 and the rhetoric of the 1%, the 1% controlling 99% of the wealth, right? And the other 99% of are the masses that really have no effect on the economic system. Now, we look at markets as crafted political institutions. Some people believe that, non-economic traditions, economy should not be our first priority. Here in the United States, I think that's one of our first priorities. This could be, framed with modern liberals and social democrats or democratic socialists, and that markets can be modified or maybe, leveled out, or maybe put on an even playing field a little bit more. It's one of the things to think about where, say we own a fruit stand at the corner, and then there's an open lot next to the corner, and Walmart comes in and wants to buy that land and put a Walmart there. Should the government disallow that, or should the government make it fair for maybe small business? Again, it's a matter of your own personal belief and a matter of your ideology. There's really no right or wrong answer to that. Environmentalists believe that market capitalism can lead to environmental devastation. And we need to focus more on some of these environmental priorities that exist out there. And it's something that's a real concern. Should you allow a business to pollute if it's, bringing jobs into that area? One of those moral dilemmas again. With fascists and Islamists, markets are useful tools at best. Fascist markets were acceptable as long as they contribute to national strength, and that core aspect, nationalism. Where do you think they might agree with an environmentalist, if anything? Think about that. Again, there's no right or wrong answer. Just kind of think about where fascist and an environmentalist might agree on something. Again, it's a very subjective question. Fascists took over some private businesses for war efforts, like we saw in World War II, prior to World War II. In Islamists, some Quran-based limits on capitalism exist. So, we talk about mixed economy between liberals and Marxists. We have the influence of T.H. Green, where he said that liberty was an individual freedom to realize his or her own human potential, but we needed things like welfare, education, and social support in order to, again, level the playing field for some people that might not be as fortunate. Okay, so kind of to summarize this, there is a graph here, or a side by side that shows the differences when we ask the question if markets are naturally good under each ideology, and it kind of focuses on that. So go ahead and take a look at it, and then maybe come up and think, and maybe try to come up with how your own ideologies developed out of this. Now, if we look at of covering the whys of German redistribution, or that redistribution of the wealth, let's talk about 3 plausible explanations for that. Germany shifts roughly twice as much money as America does to its poor citizens. There was a late industrialization in Germany and felt the pressure to compete economically and militarily. Germany was split into East Germany and West Germany. West Germany actually had the more redistribution programs. East Germany was run by communists. They came together as a federal state late, so it lacked a strong top-down state. A lot of compromise-driven politics, compromising in the world of government. And that strong vocational programs, which led to a strong relationship between the company and its workers, where people were maybe working at a company for the majority of their career. Is there a pattern of generous welfare states among states that face strong external threats as they've developed? Kind of ask yourself that question. And just another chart, just go ahead and take a look at it and the different explanations out of that. Okay, so this is what we got. Coming to conclusion, economies focus on producing and allocating wealth, but it is a part of a complex set of collective decision-making processes, whether it's a free market economy, a command economy, or a mixed economy. And we can contrast choice in economies on a spectrum from free markets to interventionist governments. So, the pure market economy all the way to a pure command economy. Okay, everybody, so that's basically what we're going to talk about Chapter 9. Have a good rest of your day.